I watched the HOA plow roll past my house at 4:02 a.m. with its blade angled like a weapon, and I heard my stone mailbox crack in the dark when a wave of salted slush slammed into it. Then 4 hours later, the HOA president was on my porch holding a $895 fine, blaming me for the hazard her own crew created. And in that moment, I realized I didn't move into a peaceful neighborhood. I moved into someone else's kingdom, and she was about to make sure I understood that. You know what I mean. My name's Miles Bennett. I live in a development outside Rochester, Minnesota, called Ironleaf Ridge, and I'm the kind of guy who likes things quiet. I work construction, estimating, which basically means my job is measuring reality all day long. Numbers, boundaries, timelines, receipts, the boring stuff that becomes real important. The second someone decides to lie with confidence. And when I bought this place, I thought I was buying calm, clean sidewalks, friendly waves, the kind of neighborhood where your biggest worry is whether you remembered to bring your trash can back in before dinner. For the first week, it felt like that I'd make coffee stand by the window, watch the streetlights glow over fresh snow, and think, all right, maybe life finally gets to be normal again. Then Camille Rourke introduced herself, and normal packed its bags. She caught me unloading boxes the second weekend, beige coat hair. Perfect clipboard, hugged to her chest like it was a badge. She smiled, like she practiced it in a mirror. "Welcome to Ironleaf," she said. "I'm Camille, HOA president. We're really proud of our standards here." And I smiled back because I'm polite. I said, "Nice to meet you. I'm Miles." And her eyes drifted past me to the moving pod in my driveway, that big metal container that everyone uses for like a day or two. And her smile stayed, but the warmth dropped out of it. "That can't stay visible longer than 24 hours, she said, like she was reading off a script. "It's in the handbook. I'll email you the page." And I laughed because it was so absurd. It came out as a laugh. But she didn't laugh back. She just nodded once like she'd made a point. And 10 minutes later, I had an email with a PDF attachment highlighted, circled practically screaming at me in neon yellow. The pod was gone the next day, and I figured that was that. But 2 mornings later, I opened my front door at 6:07 a.m. and found a notice taped to it. "Unapproved exterior storage, $150 fine." And I stood there in slippers holding a piece of paper, accusing me of a thing that literally did not exist anymore. And I remember thinking maybe this is a mistake. Maybe someone typed the wrong address. So I did the adult thing. I emailed the HOA office, attached the receipt from the pickup company, kept my tone calm. "Please withdraw the fine." The pod was removed within the allowed time frame, and Camille replied herself, not the office, not a secretary's Camille. "We enforce community standards consistently," she wrote. "Consider this an educational fine. Welcome to Ironleaf." Educational, like I was a kid, getting swatted with a ruler. And that's when the first little knot formed in my chest. Not anger, yet more like confusion, mixed with that uneasy feeling you get when you realize somebody's smiling while they take a swing at you. I paid it because honestly, I wanted my life back, and I told myself it wasn't worth the stress. But once you pay a person like Camille, you don't buy peace. You buy their attention, and attention is what she fed on. The next week I got cited because my trash bin was street visible after pickup, like I was supposed to teleport it back inside. The second the truck rolled away. Then I got a note about my garage. Side door not being painted to match the approved shade. Chart, yes, a shade chart, and yes, she attached it again. And the worst part wasn't the money. It was the tone. The way she spoke to me, like I was a problem. She'd been assigned to manage, Always polite, always patronizing, always with that little phrase. We all have to do our part, or it's about pride. And I'm telling you, there's a certain kind of person who says, community standards the way other people say. Because I said so and Camille was that person. Then the forecast started warning about a heavy storm, the kind where the weather app stops being cute and starts sounding like it's trying not to panic. And the HOA blasted out an email signed by Camille. In bold snow operations, are under HOA authority. Residents must cooperate. Obstructions, interference, or complaints may result in enforcement action. And I read the word complaints twice, because who threatens people for complaining about snow, right? But it was right there, and I felt it in my gut, like she wasn't warning the neighborhood. She was warning me. And I went to bed that night with my phone on the nightstand and a weird tightness behind my ribs, like I was waiting for a shoe to drop. Around 4:00 a.m., the camera alert buzzed, and I rolled over. Squinted, expecting to see blowing snow or a cat. And instead, I saw the HOA plow truck creeping down my street with its blade down, moving slow like it had all the time in the world. It turned where the HOA maintenance lane meets the road, and the blade angled toward my house. Not the curb, not the common area toward my front steps. Then the driver pushed a thick, brown, salty wave straight into my walk and slammed it into my stone mailbox so hard I heard the crack from inside my kitchen. I sat up in bed and just stared at the screen, because my brain didn't want to accept what my eyes were watching. The driver paused, then pushed again. Yeah, that happened. Then he rolled on like he'd done exactly what he came to do. By the time I pulled on boots, he was gone, and my front steps looked like somebody dumped a dirty ice smoothie on them, and my mailbox leaned just enough to make my jaw tighten. So I did the one thing my job trained me to do. I documented everything. Photos, close-ups, timestamps, screenshots. I saved the clip to 2 places because I've learned the hard way that proof disappears when it's inconvenient for the wrong person. Then at 6:11 a.m., there was a knock on my door. Firm, confident. Like the door belonged to the person knocking. And when I opened it, Camille was standing there with a paper already printed, already filled out, and she didn't even bother with small talk. Unsafe snow obstruction, she said. $895. You've blocked pedestrian access. And I stared at her, then at the slush pile, then back at her. Your plow did that, I said. And she blinked, slow, like she was tired of explaining basic life to me. Weather happens, she said. You're responsible for your lot, and I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was so shameless. It short-circuited my brain. So you dump road slush onto my steps, I said. And then fine me for it. And her smile tightened into something sharp. Miles, she said. Voice low, don't make this difficult. Clean it up if you refuse. We escalate, and I said, escalate. To what? And that's when she let the threat show just a little. Lien late fees, legal action. The association has counsel on retainer. And she said it like she was telling me the weather report. Like it was normal to threaten someone's home because they asked you not to break their mailbox. I emailed the HOA office with the video attached, and I got a template response within an hour. Snow placement isn't guaranteed. Residents are responsible. Contact your insurance, like the mailbox cracked itself out of spite, and then things got petty. In a way that felt calculated. My pool key fob stopped working. My gate code malfunctioned. I got another letter about non-compliance with a warning about late fees and liens. and I realized she wasn't trying to fix anything. She was trying to train me like a dog. Like if she shocked me enough times, I'd learn to roll over. I want to say I stayed calm. But the truth is, I started losing sleep. Not because I was scared of a person, but because I was watching a system get weaponized, and it messes with your head when you know you're right. And the person in charge acts like right doesn't matter. So I upgraded my cameras, because apparently peace and quiet costs extra in Ironleaf Ridge. And 2 weeks later another storm hit, and at 3:37 a.m., my phone buzzed again. Same truck, same lane, same slow roll. And this time, the driver stopped across from my house and looked up straight at my porch light, then at the camera. And I swear to you, it felt like he was checking a target. Angled the blade and shoved slush into my steps. Again heavier, more deliberate, and my mailbox base took the hit. The stone cap chipped off and vanished into the pile like it got swallowed. And I felt something flip inside me. Not rage, clarity, because now nobody could say, oops. Nobody could pretend this was a drift or an accident. It was a choice, and I had it on video in high definition. I called the non-emergency police line, and I felt almost embarrassed explaining it like, hi. Yes, I'm calling the police about snow. Except it wasn't about snow. It was about property damage and harassment. And the dispatcher didn't laugh. She just asked, do you have video? And I said, clear video. And an officer came out, watched the clip on my laptop, stepped outside, looked at the mailbox, and said quietly, that doesn't look accidental. And he filed a report and handed me a case number like he was handing me a lever. A friend connected me with an attorney, Tessa Lang, and I sent her the footage, the fines, the emails. And she called me back, and the first thing she said was, they fined you for the obstruction they created. And I said, yep. And she sighed like she'd seen this movie before. Okay. She said, we keep this boring and factual boring wins, and you know what? She was right. Because people like Camille live off drama. They want you yelling. They want you emotional. They want you looking unstable. Boring documentation is like kryptonite to them. That same afternoon, my neighbor across the street, Nora Whitaker, knocked on my door holding a casserole dish like she needed an excuse to be there, and she leaned in and said, do you know who owns Silver Pine Snow Solutions? And I said, the contractor. And she nodded. Camille's brother-in-law. She said different last name, same family, and the contract never went out for bids. And suddenly the whole pattern clicked into place. The confidence, the bullying, the way she tossed around the HOA lawyer like a personal bodyguard. This wasn't just power. It was business. And if she could scare people into silence, nobody would look at the money. Tessa helped me file a county complaint for improper dumping and property damage, and we requested records, contracts, communications, anything with her signature on it. And I'll tell you, that was the moment the story shifted. Because up until then, Camille thought she was dealing with a guy she could push around a new homeowner who'd get tired and pay. But once you bring in paperwork from outside the HOA, once the county gets involved, the little kingdom starts to feel less invincible. The next HOA meeting was packed, folding chairs full, people standing along the walls, that low, angry buzz that means folks are done being polite. Camille sat at the front table in her beige coat, with her clipboard, tapping it like she could hypnotize the room into behaving. And when she called my name, she tried to sound bored. Bennett has concerns about snow operations like I was whining about a puddle. And I walked up with my laptop, and I said, I'm not here to argue. I'm here to show you. And I played the footage on the big screen. The truck stopping, the driver looking at my camera. The blade angling toward my steps. The slush hitting my mailbox. The crack, and the room went silent. In that heavy way silence gets when everybody realizes they've been lied to with a straight face. When the clip ended, I held up the fine notice. This was taped to my door 2 hours later, I said. And Camille cleared her throat. Snow removal is complicated, she said. There are margin errors during emergencies. And I looked at her and said, that's a weird way to describe a guy staring into my camera before he dumps. And a few people laughed. Not a fun laugh, more like relief, mixed with anger. And then Nora stood up, voice sharp. Why is our snow contract with Silver Pine Snow Solutions, the company owned by your brother-in-law, Camille? And Camille's smile twitched like a glitch. Personal attacks are not permitted, she snapped. And a guy near the aisle stood up. Did that contract ever go out for bids? And another voice from the back. My dues went up for snow. Costs. Are we paying her family? And Camille started doing that thing power trippers do when the room stops obeying them. She banged the gavel. Order, she said. Order, but the gavel sounded like a toy in her hand now. Tessa stood up and introduced herself, calm as ice. I'm Tessa Lang, counsel for Mr. Bennett. She said, a county complaint has been filed. Any retaliation after tonight will be documented. And I watched Camille's eyes flick to her board members, like she was searching for backup. And instead, one of them leaned into the mic, voice tired, and asked Camille, did you disclose this relationship? And Camille stood up fast. This is a smear campaign by a non-compliant homeowner, she said, and I said, steady. Non-compliant, because I won't pay for damage you caused. And then something happened that I didn't plan, but I should have seen coming. A woman in the third row raised her phone and said, they dumped on my driveway last winter too. My kid slipped. I complained and got fined for excessive salt. And another homeowner stood up, same here, and another. They did it to us. And suddenly, it wasn't my fight anymore. It was everybody's. And you could feel years of swallowed frustration rising up in real time. Then the timing turned. Cinematic, one board member checked his phone, went pale, and said into the microphone, County Code Enforcement just emailed. They're opening an investigation into improper dumping and contractor liability. They want the contractor agreement and board communications, and Camille stared at him like she could will the words back into his mouth. That's ridiculous, she said. And Tessa replied, that's accountability. And people started demanding a vote, and Camille kept banging the gavel, but nobody cared. And a board member named Mark leaned forward, voice exhausted. Motion to suspend the president, pending investigation, and freeze contractor payments immediately. And Camille snapped. You can't do that, and Mark didn't blink. Watch us, and hands went up. Enough hands, and Camille's face drained like the air got sucked out of her. She grabbed her binder and shoved papers into it, like she was stuffing a collapsing identity into a folder. You'll regret this, she hissed. And that's when the back door opened, and a county officer stepped into the room calm. Official no drama. Excuse me, he said. Is Camille Rourke here, ma'am? We need to speak with you about the contractor agreement and the dumping complaints and... Camille froze, and for the first time since I met her, she had nothing. No smile, no script, no threat, Just a woman standing in front of a room that finally stopped believing her. She swallowed and whispered yes. And that's where her power died. Not with a confession, not with a big speech, just with consequences walking into the room and calling her by name. Now here's the part people still argue about. Because the next morning, I didn't sit around waiting for the HOA to do the right thing. I cleaned my steps, and I pushed every bit of that slush into a long ridge along my property line, perfectly inside my boundary. Neat, measured, legal. It didn't block the HOA lane. It didn't touch common property, but it was visible from the street like a statement, like a line drawn in frozen dirt. And some neighbors thought it was petty. One emailed me. "You're escalating another." Wrote. Finally. Someone stood up to her. And I get it, I do. Because it's uncomfortable. When somebody stops playing nice. But here's what I know. When someone uses rules like a weapon, playing nice just teaches them. It works, and I was done teaching that lesson. I haven't seen Camille since that night. I've heard rumors, investigations, audits, whatever, but I'm not here to pretend I know the ending beyond what I saw with my own eyes. What I do know is this. The day she tried to fine me for the damage she caused, she expected me to fold. And I almost did. Because that's what most people do when the system leans on them. They pay. They stay quiet. They try to survive it. And I don't blame anyone for that. But if you're watching this, and you've ever had someone in power make you feel small, like your reality didn't matter, like your rights were a suggestion, then you know exactly why I couldn't let it go. So tell me what you think. Was I right to fight back the way I did? Staying legal, but making it visible? Or did I cross a line? Even if I never stepped over the boundary, would you have paid and moved on? Would you have gone to war with paperwork? Or would you have done something louder? Drop your take in the comments, because I know people are going to split on this one. And if you've got your own HOA horror story, or a boss, or a landlord, or anyone who used rules as a way to bully you, I want to hear it. And if you want more real stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and share this with the friend who always says I'd never let someone treat me like that. Because you don't really know what you'll do until someone shows up at your door with a fine for the mess they made.